Hello and welcome. I'm Zain Dhanani, your host, your co-host. Really excited for this episode today. We've got something that's near and dear to my heart. I've also got my co-host here, Stephen O'Rourke. What's going on, brother?
What's up, man? Excited to talk Cowboys today.
Yeah, I'm excited too. I mean, something that the audience might know, might not know. I've been watching the Cowboys since 1996, so this is a big deal for me. The Cowboys Thanksgiving games are always special to me as well. Growing up in Dallas, not there anymore, but growing up in Dallas, went to a number of the games. The real very famous Randy Moss 3-catch, 62 yards, 3 touchdown game where he was lined up against Deion Sanders. Big one for me. There's so many memories in my history. I think I had tickets at one game where DeAndre Jordan, Blake Griffin, and Chris Paul were there.
Oh, nice.
I think there was one with T.I. that was there. There's been so many fun times for me. So very excited for this one. We're going to go deep into the weeds on the Cowboys offense. We'll touch their defense as well. We'll go a little bit into the matchup that we see here against the Kansas City Chiefs. This is supposed to be one of the biggest games of the entire year in terms of viewership. I mean, you're talking about Thanksgiving, you're talking about the Cowboys, you're talking about Taylor Swift, and you're talking about the Kansas City Chiefs, right? So I don't think you could talk about anything else other than this game for this week. And I know that hurts you, Steve, given that the Lions are playing as well. But we're going to get deep into the weeds on the
I don't think
offense.
it really affects it that much.
Yeah, that might maybe not.
I feel like the Lions might. It's really like the first two games of this week with Dallas and then the Lions game before it. They both might break viewership records. Like by them, it might be back to back because I think that like the Dallas or the Green Bay Detroit game has a ton of eyes on it too. It's a fun day tomorrow.
It's a fun day. I'll let you have that one, but I mean, we're talking viewership records on the Cowboys game for sure. So we're going to come back in a second and we'll get back into it and we'll start talking about the Cowboys wide receivers, George Pickens, CeeDee Lamb, Jake Ferguson, Dak Prescott, etc. All right, we're back. Now the topic everybody's been waiting for. Man, Steve, we just saw a breakout performance in front of a big audience on Sunday last week from George Pickens. People are now questioning who's the alpha in the room. Is it Pickens? Is it CeeDee Lamb? You know, my personal opinion, not that it matters, is that you've got two really great receivers, and that's what really matters. But Steve, you've gone through the film. I mean, I have too. And you've seen special things out of both of these receivers. Let's go deep in the weeds on what you've seen from George Pickens first, and then we can attack the CeeDee Lamb question and maybe the stone hands.
Yeah. And before we jump in to answer that question of like, who's the alpha in the room, I think you are looking at more of a T. Higgins, Jamar Chase type situation, although I don't know who I'd put above the other. I just think they get used differently. And Pickens being added to this offense increases the value of CD and vice versa. And so I think it's just you're dealing with an offense that has a lot of weapons to work with, a lot of versatility, and they have a scheme that's working for them. And one of the big things is that what they're doing with Pickens that I think like a lot of people have the big question of, well, how is it different? Why does George Pickens look so much better here than he did in Pittsburgh? I think a big part of that.
The play? I think this might be the play that I posted on Twitter too.
Yeah.
And
So
if you're not following Steve or myself on Twitter, it's at Dhanani Zain. You can see it here. You can find us online, and it's at Call Me Steve07. So make sure you do that because we're posting clips all the time. Go for it, Steve.
Yeah. So I think like the big difference, if you look at it from what he was doing in Pittsburgh to what he's been doing in Dallas, is that he really just has a quarterback that's willing to threaten the middle of the field, which makes George Pickens be used over the middle more often, using him on dig routes. Because if you look at his percentages for routes, they kind of match out to be pretty similar from Pittsburgh to now. But the big difference is that he has a pretty even split between digs and outs, whereas in Pittsburgh, he was running a lot more out routes, not as many in routes. And that was mainly because he has quarterbacks that didn't want to threaten the middle of the field. But now that you have Pickens with the ability to break deep, break in, break out, you can't lean as much to, defending him on the outside, thinking it's going to be a hitch, thinking it's going to be an out. It's more of a two-way go for him, which makes him more effective. And so he's at the top of the
before you get into this clip too,
Yeah.
let's just mention that from the fantasy points data suite, you can look up some of the metrics that we have on Pickens and CeeDee Lamb. They're both performing really well when you look at route win rates, separation score, etc.
Yep.
Steve is our resident ass man, as we've covered in the past. But just in general, Pickens is basically able to run this full route tree, and then we'll show you some clips. Steve's going to walk you through like what you're seeing, but he's able to basically do the entire route tree. So it's not your typical X receiver that's just running straight down the field or whatever. Like he's running big boy routes. He's one of the top players in slants in terms of win rate on slants. I think he's like number 4 in the NFL, with CeeDee Lamb being like number 3 or number 2.
Yeah.
So you're going to see some stuff on these clips where you're going to be really excited about the potential that Pickens has for this year, for the rest of this season, for future seasons, etc. You're seeing a receiver that's only 24 years old and is going to be probably is already and will continue to probably be one of the top receivers in the NFL.
Yeah, and what Pickens adds to this offense is he adds that solo ISO receiver, X receiver that you can kind of rely on the backside of a lot of concepts to be available. And that's helped Dak a lot, move off first reads, get to second reads, and use Pickens as a primary, or use Pickens as a primary read and then move to a concept on the backside. And so what has helped is the run game has looked better so they can get into a play action. And now with play action, you get the middle of the field wide open. And Pickens is I think he's not talked about enough as one of the best route runners in the NFL because he can play physical and he can play off breaks really well. He gets in and out of his breaks. So like here, he attacks Adoree Jackson, gets right in his face, locks up, and then just throws him off. He's wide open in the middle of the field, goes up high points it, makes the catch. Dak abused Adoree Jackson in this game, and that's kind of what Dak's MO a little bit has been, is finding the weak link in the secondary and attacking that guy repeatedly. It's why you see CeeDee and George Pickens kind of go back and forth on who goes off that week.
You have this paused right now, and I think I posted this on Twitter earlier this week too about this exact same play. So I just want to like set the table for everybody. We've got 13 personnel. There's 3 tight ends in the game right now. And when the Cowboys like to kind of get that going and show run plays, they usually have span forward number 89, Luke Schoonmaker in the game as well. Obviously 13 personnel, you're going to see kind of that situation. That play was very special to me because it's another thing that we've seen from the NFL meta where you're going out of 13, you're doing play action. The Cowboys knew that lately Quinyon Mitchell has been a boundary corner, so he's been on the other side of the field.
Yeah,
so you're basically setting up George Pickens to be
that back.
Yeah,
and for everyone, and just to interject, what boundary means is that he's usually playing on the short side of the field, where whichever hash the ball is on, he's on the short side of the field, and then you call the other side field side.
Yep. So we've got Quinyon Mitchell on the bottom part of the screen here, and then when they set up this play action, so they're in nickel defense because I think they have like Reed Blankenship or somebody in the box here with the outside, what's looking like an outside linebacker.
Yeah, I think that's DeJean there.
Yeah, Cooper DeJean. Anyway, what they're doing here is the run fit. When you play the clip, you can see and stop. Steve, just stop it like right before So you see the linebackers basically taking steps forward. That pretty much opens up the middle of the field for Pickens. Like when he runs this route here, he's basically just running one-on-one with Adoree Jackson, and Pickens is going to win that like 9 times out of 10. So it's a combination. One, Pickens is incredible. We covered that. We're going to show more clips about that too. But then you're also seeing the offense in general being structured in a way that's very, very smart. And Dak is also very capable of understanding where he has leverage in the offense and knowing which matchups to attack. It's brilliant.
Exactly. And then, so now what that also helps set up, and I didn't throw clips in here. I threw in just a couple deeper route clips for Pickens, but what they do love, what Dak loves to do is they love to do the quick drop under center, quick slants, quick hitches. It's what Pickens and CeeDee are utilized in a lot. I mean, Dallas probably their receivers probably lead are up there in the NFL in hitch route rates. Just because that like the slant or slant flat combos, stick combos are pretty integral to the quick passing game of Dallas. But I didn't include a lot of that. But that's where, like you said, the slant win rate for both of them, CeeDee's at 42%. George Pickens is at like 32%. And so like that's having those guys win like that helps the offense so much because you can stay on task with 5-6 yard passes. But
I think there's a thing that people in either the fantasy community or just general like film bros, whatever, people always get on guys that are like slant boys. And these guys are not slant boys. They can do a lot of things, but they're extremely good at slants. And what that does is that creates a lot of yak situations too, if you're able to make enough separation from, in which they are doing, create enough separation from the guy that's in coverage, whether that's a zone or man. If you're able to win in that situation, you are setting yourself up for a pretty hefty yak situation as well. So we're going to see it.
And Pickens and CeeDee Lamb both have about 0.5 targets per route run when they run slants. So for both of them, 50% of the time they run a slant, they're getting targeted. It's obviously a big part of their offense. But like I said, this now, what you can do with Pickens also is you can put him into a stack situation up with Turpin, isolate CeeDee down at the bottom, and you can now work him deep down the field where he excels. And so now, like you said, what changes it is he has the in route available to him, he has the out route available to him, and he has vertical available to him. And he's one of the most deceptively fast receivers I've seen. The way he strides it's so long that I think it throws a lot of corners off and is what helps him separate, because if you see here, he can explode in and out of his breaks, and he just stays at top speed, and just because of that long stride and that big cut, he's able to gain so much ground so quickly, and then he can win contested catches. And so it really is just Pickens is playing with a good quarterback. Dak is playing really good football. He's healthy, and he's playing with a quarterback that isn't afraid to throw it up to him and isn't afraid to give him chances and isn't afraid to throw over the middle. So it's like all of these combinations of like Pickens getting better, Prescott being good, and their offense just having a ton of weapons that opens this passing game up for Pickens so much.
Yeah, it's a little underrated that like some quarterbacks are afraid of the middle of the field, right? And Dak is not one of those guys. He's experienced. I was reading the other day, someone wrote an article about it, but it's like, yeah, he's seen Vic Fangio's defense a bunch of times. He knows what's coming. There's probably nothing. He's a very experienced veteran. There's probably nothing he hasn't seen so far. So you can throw a nice disguise out there or whatever. But he's going to eventually figure it out because he's seen it before. So exactly. It's more just like, sometimes quarterbacks make bad throws. That just happens. And it happens for Dak, especially when you're under pressure, et cetera. But you're seeing a guy like George Pickens who's running this full route tree, which may be a little bit different from what he did in Pittsburgh in some seasons. And then on top of that, a guy that can actually like get it to him in the right spots.
Yeah.
Trusts him for jump balls. And we're all going to see the amazing like jump ball type of like receptions that George Pickens has. But it's not just that. Like it's truly like an every type of route receiver. And that's something that's really special. And he's going to be a free agent this season, in this offseason, and he's going to make a lot of money.
Yeah, he will. And I think he's proving himself to be a bona fide number one. And he's proving that when he's given a good quarterback and in an offense that functions well, he can excel. And here's now another thing that Dallas can do is you can go two receivers with Pickens and Lamb on the bottom on the same side, and that adds its own threat. And now this is just a dagger combination, but Pickens is just, again, so physical, so good at the top of his break to break open free and be available in the middle of the field. And you see a lot of teams with the increase in too high defenses and things like that, although they go single high here. That dagger is such a layup throw for a lot of quarterbacks if they're not afraid to rip it. And Pickens is one of the best on those dig routes. That it just adds another layer to that offensive explosiveness that they didn't have before, with not having like a bona fide X and having to have Jalen Tolbert out there and a kind of a rotating cat, or more Michael Gallup or Brandon Cooks. And like, you can see the difference of what having like a top tier receiver at that position with Lamb and those other weapons there, what it does to that offense.
It's kind of funny because the Cowboys have consistently had that type of player in that role. And even like you mentioned the guys just now, and then you go back even further and it's like Terrence Williams. And that's like essentially the exact same thing. It's just funny that they've continued to do that. But I think what's underrated from the clip that you were showing was when you have the guys on the same side, the safety has to play over the top on one of them, right? So he kind of, on that play, he was actually going with Lamb, which just means that, and this is, what that does is that means that this is essentially going to be a single like coverage situation for George Pickens in this situation. So he's going to win that a bunch, especially on Adoree Jackson. And they picked on Adoree Jackson a ton this past game.
Yeah.
But I think that's the structure of the offense. It's Dak knowing his matchups, et cetera, right? So I think the environment in general has really played into this situation for George Pickens. He's clearly being able to showcase his entire route tree and actually getting the ball on some of the over the middle plays. And, Dak has great ball placement as well. So we're just finally seeing all of it come together for a receiver who had to grow a little bit and get put in the right situation with the right type of quarterback to make this all work.
Yeah, and it's opened up their play action game. This is another play action. They have a very multiple run game that we'll talk about a little bit, but they marry their play action with the run game, which helps a lot. And it does. You've seen it on the two play actions that we showed, the one before. It draws the linebackers up just enough both times that Dean ends up getting sucked in by the drag underneath, and then no one's deep over the middle. It's wide open, and that's it there. I think Schottenheimer has a good scheme, and it just, like I said, the weapons and everything, it just opens up the offense a ton. And George Pickens makes it a big part of that.
Yeah. We've talked a lot about Pickens. I think a lot of people are also very interested in knowing a little bit more about CeeDee Lamb. Of course, the two Eagles games, he's had a ton of drops, very, very prominent situations where he's dropping the ball, things that people are seeing. And, with the rise of George Pickens, people are very concerned. Like, is CD still really good? Like, what's going on with him? He had a bunch of targets in this game. He's had a bunch of targets in previous games too. We've seen him have good stat lines, but I think people are wondering, like, is he still like able to separate? Is he still doing good things when he is targeted, etc.? I don't know what your opinion is, Steve.
My opinion is it's fine. Like I think this comes up with CeeDee Lamb every other year at least, of like, he has a game. It was his thing coming out. He can make circus catches, but sometimes the routine catches go by the wayside a little bit at times. And it happened. I feel like it does happen a lot, like throughout the year. Like every year there's a period where he drops a couple balls and this ends up happening. But as far as like raw separation, everything, he's the same guy. And again, like I said, a big part of their offense is using him on slant routes. A big part of their offense is using him on hitch routes underneath. But then they also use him mainly as like a crosser guy. He runs crossing routes at a 16% rate, and he gets targeted on 32% of his crossing routes he runs. And that's where his utility is with this offense, is if they can get into a man situation, they like to have CD coming across the middle, whether, lower depth or like middle underneath or over the middle, and have him win. So like, this is another play action. A lot of the Cowboys' big plays have come off of play action this year. This is going to be just like a deep cross combo, and they get
CD's at the top of the screen on this one.
Yep, they get it looks like it's going to be cover 3. They're dropping into a zone, but you get
it's cover 3.
You get a one-on-one situation with CeeDee in the corner, and he gets a step every time. It's very similar to George Pickens in that he is very good at closing the space with the corner, like there, getting hands into the corner's chest to push, like doing enough to push off, create space, and then he's so fluid with his running that he gets in and out of his breaks really well, and it throws the corner off like that. And he has a drop here.
I have to mention for this play too, if you go back, like this is play action, right? So it's a similar situation where CD's running across her. The linebackers take a couple steps forward first, and then you're just creating space when it's essentially making the CD route one-on-one coverage because the linebacker depth isn't going to impact the throw anymore because they're just not getting enough depth in that situation. So it's one-on-one. It's not a man coverage, but it is man coverage in that situation. Yeah, essentially, they're matched up.
Yeah, it's basically a cover 3 match.
So CeeDee Lamb is going to cook. I mean, he's going to cook Adoree Jackson. We're just going to keep picking on Adoree Jackson from last week over and over again. But it's something that the Cowboys offense is designed to do. When you have 2 alpha receivers, one of them is going to be matched up on somebody that's not as good, and they're probably going to be able to win that matchup. Now, when you're playing zone coverage, it doesn't always end up being like a man-to-man situation, but you can create man-to-man situations in zone coverage. And that's what the Cowboys did in this situation where it's cover 3, Dak recognizes it. And basically what you have is the corner that's aligned to CeeDee Lamb because he's pressing vertical basically has to stick with him. The safety is playing the deep middle, and then Quinion Mitchell is staying with George Pickens. And I mean, CeeDee Lamb just runs across the body of Adoree Jackson, and he's such a good route runner, and he's great with yak and all that kind of stuff too. That he's gonna win this route.
And what Dallas has done well this year is they've thrown a lot of motion, and they're running motion on nearly like over 60% of their dropbacks have motion involved with it. And it's eye candy like this, where again, they like to have Pickens isolated down at the bottom. They like to have CeeDee in the slot, motioned into being an outside receiver, create that confusion over there, have Pickens isolate, and then let itself work out. And with this, again, it's a good play action to CeeDee. And then, so that's, again, they love to work the play action, deep passing game, overs and routes. It's a pretty integral part of their game. And it's where Pickens and CeeDee Lamb really excel. And then another spot, like I said, it's a lot of crossing routes for CeeDee Lamb. So another spot that they really like to kind of get him into is these underneath dig crossing routes. This is a levels concept. They like these a lot to get Lamb yak opportunities, quick hitting. Here you kind of get
in the slot here, right? So Chip's right. He's in the slot next to Ferguson. Ferguson's the inside slot receiver. CeeDee Lamb's the outside slot receiver.
Yep. So that's where they like to do the spread it out every once in a while. They like to get into gun. They go 5 wide, 4 wide. They get the defense really spread out, and that's where they have CeeDee run a lot of his slot dig routes, slot slant routes to get him these easy win, easy yak opportunities. Again, he drops this one, but that is what they're doing with CeeDee and Pickens is they're using CeeDee a lot on the crossing routes, and they're using Pickens a lot on, again, similar situation like this. You've got CeeDee to the trip side. You have Pickens isolated down low. You're going to have the levels concept up here, and then you have Pickens isolated with his own route down at the bottom. And it gives, like I said, Dak a two-way go of he saw the defense play out here. You kind of get the linebacker underneath. So it essentially becomes kind of a one-on-one situation with this concept. So Dak goes to his first read concept here. But that's what makes Pickens so valuable is that you have to have a linebacker kind of respect that Pickens side, and you have to have a good corner on the backside. Otherwise, Dak will go to Pickens every time. So, like, I guarantee had Adoree Jackson been down at the bottom of the screen here, now he's on the boundary, so it ends up being Quinion. But had it been Adoree, he probably would have looked this way. But that just is kind of it's the Cowboys offense as a whole has become so versatile in their passing game, and because of their ability to have George Pickens isolated and then work a bunch of concepts with CeeDee kind of being the primary read throughout that concept, while also having, guys like Turpin and Ferguson working their areas that they're good in. And it just kind of marries the pass game together really well.
Yeah, one thing I wanted to make sure we address too, because the two clips you showed just happened to be CeeDee Lamb drops. Obviously, he got open on those plays. I, I'm going to give my perspective. I want your perspective as well. My perspective on drops, especially for guys that have like proven track records like CeeDee Lamb, they're going to have drops. Like it's just going to happen. It sucks that it happened. I mean, it sucks for the Cowboys that it happened in like prime situations against a hated rival, right?
Yeah.
But it happens for receivers, and a lot of times the good ones figure it out, you know. And when we look at like drop percentages for like the worst receivers, it's like 15% or something like that. So we're talking like one out of every like 8 or 7 or so passes.
Yeah, it's never
going to catch most of those.
It's never as much as you think. I mean, this year he has a 10% drop rate. Not ideal, but if we're gonna pretend like it hasn't been an issue before, that's wrong. I mean, if you go back to 2024, he had a 7% drop rate, so he's a little bit above pace there, but he's had a tough couple of weeks. If you go back to 2023, hold on, I gotta wait for it to load. But this was kind of who CeeDee is. He only had a 2.8% in 2023, so I stand corrected there. But I think you're seeing it with Amon-Ra. It kind of happens with the receivers. Shit happens with guys. It's not always perfect when you get 80 targets a week.
I want to make sure that we also
targets, through 11 weeks.
Yeah, definitely. I want to make sure we also cover just the fantasy perspective on these two receivers, right? So George Pickens, CeeDee Lamb. People keep wondering, like, is there one that's better? Is there one that's going to be the alpha for fantasy purposes, etc.? I play in a lot of high stakes stuff. Probably way too much money on fantasy sports, to be quite honest. But I think that to me, the main thing is it's going to be matchup dependent, but both these guys are going to eat in this offense. Most of the time, there's going to be somebody that eats a little bit more, right? Because you saw this past game, they were able to get Pickens in situations with Dory Jackson a little bit more often, et cetera. He made the plays. Also, he caught the ball in those situations. So those stats are going to look a little bit better. They're both winning a ton of routes, so they're going to get open. That means the ball is probably going to be spread between the two. That means that a lot of the volume is probably going to go to two of them. If they drop back 30 times, I'm expecting like at least 50% of those targets to go to one of those two guys. So a 25% target share between the two of them. And I think and this offense is so explosive, and we'll talk about it a little bit more too, but that means that you're getting 2 wide receiver ones. And one game, someone's going to be the guy that scores like 30 points and one guy scores 15. But the next week, it could be the opposite. We'll talk a little bit more about the actual matchup with the Chiefs this week too. But we're going to talk a little bit more about some of the other receivers the Cowboys have, specifically Jake Ferguson. I just want to make sure we cover that. And we'll give our perspective on like Ferguson, Pickens, whatever, for this Chiefs matchup a little bit later on. Anything to add to that, Steve?
Just that, like, you can kind of see in their target share a little bit. It's pretty even. Dak likes to work CeeDee a little bit more against two high. Dak likes to work George Pickens a little bit more against single high, which kind of makes sense. CeeDee's your underneath crossing route, like I said, quick stick route type stuff, settling into zone. That's where CeeDee operates really well. That's where you're kind of looking for cover against two high. Single high, you're getting a little bit more man up situations, one-on-one situations. That's where Pickens comes in. So
Dak likes to attack the deep balls on those too. So you're saying like, hey, Pickens is going to run a go. I think I showed clips on Twitter 2 weeks ago with Sauce Gardner. It was cover 3. Pickens is running deep. It's basically man-to-man in that situation because the safety plays someone else. And it's just Pickens just picking on the cornerback, basically.
Pickens has basically, I would say, like kind of a Javonte Adams level targetability that in that offense, where like Matthew Stafford, it doesn't matter the coverage, it doesn't matter what ends up happening. There are going to be plays where he just inherently likes what he sees or just wants to go to Javonte. And he does that. It's the same thing with Dak and George Pickens, where there are just going to be some situations where one-on-one he wants to give his guy a chance because George Pickens offers that ability.
Definitely. All right, so we're going to go into Jake Ferguson a little bit too. I think, tight ends are important for fantasy. It's important for this offense as well. He plays a key role. Obviously, the other two receivers are getting the ball most of the time. When it's not going to them, it's likely going to Jake Ferguson. He's had some big games this season as well. And he's an integral part of their offense when it comes to play action. We'll show some clips here. But Steve, tell us a little bit about what we need to know with Jake Ferguson.
Yeah, so Jake Ferguson, really his role in the offense has changed a little bit as CeeDee has come back. Where you're seeing the biggest change is his usage against too high. While CeeDee was hurt, Ferguson was sitting at about a 28% target rate against too high. Since CeeDee's come back, that's dropped to about 14.5%. So a lot of the seam and underneath work that Ferguson was getting in those weeks that CeeDee was gone, that's now going back to CeeDee. And where Ferguson's utility is a lot underneath. And then also he's a seam guy. He's Dak's another kind of like go-to play that Dak likes is he likes working Ferguson up the seam when he gets a too high look. So this was in the get. I think this one turns into a touchdown. Or he gets tackled at the 1 yard line, I believe, on this one, but they get too high coverage. Dak, who knows if it's a check? He's raising his hand, but he does love to get this inline Ferguson working up the seam where he's going to have to try to fit the ball in between the linebacker and the safety. And this is really where Ferguson kind of is becoming useful against too high since CeeDee has come back, is the ability to rip those seams over the linebackers and underneath the safeties. And Ferguson's a big body. He's a good route runner, and like why this works is like because of the way he stems his route. He widens the linebacker and then cuts back in. Nakobe Dean doesn't get enough depth, then he cuts in under the safety, gets open, catch down at the 1 yard line. That's where Ferguson is really big in the passing game, and I think that will come to fruition against the Chiefs. The Chiefs love to run a lot of too high, and if you kind of look at what they did last week, the Chiefs did a good job of limiting what Indy did with their outside receivers, a lot of like blocking out Alec Pierce. I think that opens up the ability for some of these plays for Jake Ferguson in this game. And I'll show
just a second on that play that you were just showing. So one thing that I like to point out too is like, we're talking about a seam route. There's so many ways that you can run these individual routes as well. Like there's creativity within an individual route. We always classify something as one thing, but as you were talking about, like Ferguson is able to, he almost does like a little bit of an angle too. He starts going wide so that he sets up the defender to go outside a little bit, and then he cuts it back in, and it's still classified as a seam route. But there's just like little nuances in these situations where, you play Madden or something like that. Your guy just literally goes up straight up the field. And it's like, no, but you can bend things inside and then come back, or bend things outside, come back inside. And those are just like little tactics that receivers use to be able to generate a little bit more space. Like you as the separation guru, like what do you grade this as for him?
Honestly, this probably goes down as a 0. I would maybe give him a 1. The problem is that this is all a coverage throw. He does a great job of getting to the open space and creating open space, which is where I don't have it up on me, but I think I probably gave him a 0. But he does these are the type of throws where it's close of like, this is it relies on Dak to find the right zone and to put it in the right spot, because he widens ball and it does create the space over the middle, but really it's Dak reading Nakobe Dean here. He sees Nakobe Dean come up a little
Take a
bit,
step forward. Yeah,
exactly. He knows that the safety's outside the hash. He sees the other safety rolled to go up and play over the twins over here. So he sees that space is open, and it is on Ferguson to create that space. If he were to just run straight vertical, Nakobe Dean wouldn't have stepped up. Bond wouldn't have widened. It wouldn't have widened the safety a little bit. But then it comes down to Dak needing to put the ball over Nakobe Dean, who's not necessarily watching Ferguson. He's watching Dak's eyes. So it's hard because, I mean, it's a really good play all around. And it is where Ferguson excels, and he does add to that play, but it really just comes down to that Dak has to make the right throw, and the separation, everybody's banking on Nakobe Dean to have that deep, that kind of deep middle, and he doesn't, and it's available for Dak. So all that being said, it gets a 0, but it doesn't.
We get a hero throw at least out of this.
Yeah, but it doesn't reduce the work that Ferguson did to create that little bit of space that Dak gets to make the throw.
Yeah. And it's just underrated. I think that there's, he's clearly not a level of like a Travis Kelce. We're going to be talking about the Chiefs too a little bit. Peak Travis Kelce by any means, but it's the little nuances where you can be a cut above like just a standard, like they had Dalton Schultz before. I think Dalton Schultz was okay in that role. I think Jake Ferguson's a little bit better. He's a little bit more with his with the way that he bends those routes.
Yeah, and the big thing against Philly here was that I think Dak had a ton of time to throw. If Kansas City can force Dak to get uncomfortable on his quick throws and not have those windows available, it kind of can break down this passing game. But overall, you just have a bunch of dudes that can win consistently. And just another way that the Cowboys like to use Ferguson is they like to use him on crossing routes as well. And so because he can win against safeties, he can win against linebackers. And again, this is empty. The Cowboys do like to go into empty a decent amount. I think it's where Dak's pretty comfortable. He likes seeing the whole field and having a bunch of options available to him. But they're going to work they have a drag with CeeDee and then over route with Ferguson. And this is where you get the matchup you want. You have Ferguson against the safety, and he's big, he's quick. You kind of see the safety kind of shies away from contact a little bit, and it makes Ferguson available in the middle of the field. This is the seams, the over routes. That's where, outside of a lot of underneath flat work, check down, kind of bailout, second read, hitch, this is where Ferguson excels, is up the seams and working against safeties across the middle. And that's, again, where Dak thrives. Dak likes to work the middle of the field, and having a lot of guys at different levels, CeeDee, Ferguson, and Pickens, it makes his life a lot easier. And it's why this passing offense, pretty much no matter what, even in blowouts, they're always going to be productive. He's always going to put up yards because it's just the defenses aren't going to be able to hold them the entire time.
The interesting thing on this play too, I just like to mention kind of and give the audience a little bit about like how this play design was working out. You've got George Pickens going deep, so the safety goes with him, right? So that's basically two guys on him. Someone's over the top. You're taking away a defender from the middle of the field by doing that. Then you've got CeeDee Lamb running his drag route basically across the middle, right? So whichever defender goes with him, basically what that does is that opens up the middle of the field a ton. There's one guy that's sitting there with Jake Ferguson. So again, a schematic way of opening up the middle of the field again for Dak Prescott. We saw it on that play action that we talked about with 13 personnel earlier in the show. Where they did play action, the linebackers came up, and then Pickens was able to just kind of sit behind them and beat Adoree Jackson. Another situation here where they're designing a way for you're either going to get CeeDee Lamb that's going to be kind of in a one-on-one situation with a defender on this drag route, and he's great with yak, so he'll potentially take that upfield and get a couple more yards. Or the safety doesn't go with George Pickens, and Pickens has one-on-one with Cooper DeJean. And then you've got Jake Ferguson that's here with the safety. I can't remember if this is when they had to switch. No, this is Reed Blankenship, right?
I think it's Sidney Brown, actually.
Oh, that is, yeah, that was the question I had, because I knew that Blankenship got hurt. So I wasn't sure what part of the game this was. But anyway, I mean, he's got a one-on-one matchup over the middle of the field, and that's where Dak likes to throw the ball. So again, great play design. You've got a situation where you're setting up three different options for yourself, and just taking the one that basically presents itself as a one-on-one with the most opportunity to gain a big chunk of yards. I don't think we can overstate how good some of these play designs have worked, and the fact that you're able to do it because you have a CD and Pickens to draw coverage to sing spots of the field. Like in this situation right now, you're seeing a guy, I think Quinton Mitchell is just following CeeDee Lamb, and then the guy that's playing in the flat there, the linebacker, is staying with CD as well. So that means it's one-on-one with Ferguson. It's easy.
Yeah, you basically get man coverage from the corners with a couple underneath defenders. And then, yeah, you get Quinyon tracking CD. And again, just where Ferguson's a mismatch for a lot of safeties. He's bigger, he's pretty fast, and he separates well when he can close space. And that's what he does here. And so that's, again, like the combination of those three, and then just having Ferguson available underneath, and he's pretty decent at yak. The offense just works really well. And then a big part of what makes this all work is the resurgence of the Dallas run game, I think. I think that this has been one of the bigger surprises of the year for this offense, has been their ability to run the ball pretty consistently, and what Javonte Williams has looked like overall, I feel like has been a kind of like, I guess, asking a Cowboys fan, I feel like that's been a surprising thing for a lot of Cowboys fans.
I think it's very surprising. I'm probably on record in a lot of random places saying that I thought Javonte Williams was going to be toast, and eventually Jaden Blue, Phil Mata, or just somebody off the street. I'd never Miles Sanders, but I'll just say that was going to do something in this offense. I thought there was potential in the run game because they invested 3 first-round picks on the offensive line, and I thought Cooper Beebe was also solid. Terrence Steele has been good from a run blocking perspective, really bad in the past game over the past couple of years. And so I just thought there was potential for holes to open up. I guess I didn't also mention that I thought that the addition of Clayton Adams as the offensive coordinator, and what I saw from the Cardinals last year and how they were able to design a scheme to open up the run game, also was something that I thought was going to be underrated for this year for the Cowboys. But it really comes down to also being able to make plays. It's not just finding the hole or having a big hole and then going through it. It's 1, finding the hole. 2, when you get to that hole, are you able to break tackles with power or agility to make it happen? And I mean, I'm not going to bury the lead here, but Javonte's basically done that.
Yeah, and what a big thing that's been really good for their run game is they've been really versatile in the schemes that they're using. You'll see it with a lot of teams. I mean, like the Falcons and some other teams where they kind of lean into one concept. You'll get some teams that are more outside zone. You'll get some teams that are more inside zone. The Cowboys don't really have a concept that they lean on. I mean, you would say it's zone. I mean, he has 88 of his 181 attempts have been zone attempts between outside and inside. But even then, he's got 40. He's outside zone about like 45% of the time, inside zone 55% of the time on those zone attempts. So they work a lot, and they like to use pullers. They do a lot of counter, power, pull, lead, and I just kind of wanted to show some clips of how the versatility of the run game, and just how Javonte Williams has done well at identifying holes. They're using a lot of motion, which has been good. They vary between a lot of 11. They'll do some 11 runs. They will do runs from 12 and 13. They even 21, 22. They're very versatile in their formations. They're versatile in their run concept. So here you just have a pretty basic outside zone with the cross action of Turpin. Having Turpin in the offense as a threat to always kind of be a trick run helps hold defenses. But the Cowboys block it really well, and Javonte Williams has done well just seeing holes, and he's, that's just taking advantage of what's there and then getting the yardage. But he's
It's
excelled
funny because as people who like watch a lot of film and we like do some of the charting for these plays and stuff like that, you can't always credit these situations and say like, yeah, this like he's getting a lot of yards before contact, but there's also a talent and skill to finding the hole, right? And especially in zone blocking schemes, where you can go a number of different ways. There's not a hole that's like designated to be open.
right.
Being able to have the vision to find it and accelerate through it is a very good running back skill. I think it's very underrated, and it seems like from the clips, from the data, et cetera, that Javonte's been able to do that at a very high level.
Yeah, and you can get at Kansas City with outside zone a little bit. They give up 4.7 yards per carry on outside zone. Javonte Williams averages about 4.7 yards a carry. So that's a spot that Dallas could potentially lean on and help keep them away from running at Chris Jones a decent amount. Just another run play here. Another outside zone, but the Cowboys offensive line does a really good job. You see a lot of these where they're able to either create a wall, get holes, and Javonte Williams hits them downhill. He's good at hitting it downhill and getting the extra yards, bowling his way through. And then here, this again, formationally, this time they're into 21 personnel. They like to motion those fullbacks, get them into position, and then they like to run counter out of that. That's kind of what they've been doing a little bit this season, is getting into 21 personnel, motioning the fullback and running a counter action against it. And
people that are seeing this and looking at like the data suite from Fantasy Points and stuff like that, like how does this, like you go to like the advanced rushing tools, etc. This play gets classified as a man gap concept. That's correct, right?
Yeah.
And so you see that whenever you're looking at your different data tools and et cetera, like the Cowboys are doing multiple things in the run game. There's some teams that lean heavier into zone. There's teams that lean into man gap concepts. The Shanahan coaching tree used to be heavy zone. And then like recently you've seen McVay and other people start lean into the man gap concepts as well.
Yeah.
I think it's interesting, especially when you have a fullback in the game. Like you're probably thinking that there's going to be a man gap situation. Like there's a hole and what man gap means is there's a hole that you're hitting, right? Like there's clearly something that's designed for somebody to go through, which when you have a fullback, it kind of gives that away, but you're also now having a lead blocker that's there to take out the linebackers at the second level and create that hole as well. And Hunter Lupke's actually pretty good at it.
Yeah. And their offensive linemen are athletic. They move well, which helps. They do have a fullback that's pretty good at clearing the way, getting through holes and creating space. And Javonte Williams is good at, he's been solid with his vision and finding the hole. And it just, like when you run a lot of concepts well, it throws defenses off of what they're expecting to come. And so like this, you can kind of see them wash down with the zone action with the counter that they're then able to hit it back. So it's just where they've married it into their play action game. We showed it a little bit. They used pullers in their play action game to kind of to copy some of that stuff. I think one of the ones that we showed was actually a counter play action on that deep crosser. But again, here now we're in 12 personnel. Again, they like to motion. Again, it just creates confusion, gives backers eye candy to work with. And again, now they get into a counter from a 12 personnel look where they're, instead of having Lipke as a fullback, they're bringing him as a backside tight end, pulling with the guard. And once again, they do a good job of creating a hole. Javonte Williams slips the initial guy that's able to slip free, which he does well. He makes that first guy miss a decent amount. And then once he gets past there, they block it well and he's able to get upfield.
Is it, and when he makes the guys miss, are you thinking it's more power or is it agility usually?
He's definitely more of like he's got agility to his game. Like this next clip, he can hit spin moves, but it's almost like a power agility to it where his spin moves, his juke moves involve contact as opposed to like a Jahmyr Gibbs that's looking to avoid contact when he jukes. But like you'll see here again, what they do, they like to get into shotgun runs. Then they do this. They like to run pull lead. They have I forget who was their left tackle again.
Tyler Guyton.
Yeah, Tyler Guyton's he's an athlete, so they like to get him out in space. And again, this is Javonte Williams' first contact, where I consider it power, but it's an agility to it where he can kind of power spin through it and get the extra 3-4 yards. But it just showed like this. It's just why the Cowboys offense is working well is that they have a multiple run game. They marry their run game into their play action, and then they have a bunch of really good dudes in the passing game that can win one-on-one matchups. All of that is what kind of is making them the offense that they were in 2023 when they made the playoffs, and were one of the top offenses averaging 35 yards a game. You're starting to see that, and I think it's a credit to Dak's health. Schottenheimer is designing a pretty good offense and then just having dudes at positions.
Yeah, I think one thing that people are also wondering when it comes to Javonte Williams specifically is, well, there's probably two things. One is fantasy value, right? Like, is he a top running back? It might not be necessarily like skill set based, but just from an actual fantasy perspective, given the fact that this offense is pretty explosive and what he offers with his power and how this offensive line has been able to create some decent holes for them. I mean, the answer to that question from me is especially the fact that they're giving him most of the work. I mean, he's an RB1. Like, yeah. He's not going to be a top end guy because he's not going to have the top end speed to break big runs. I know he did earlier this year, but like workload, offensive line, offensive situation, environment, like they trust him. He's in there all the time. It's not going to change unless he gets injured. It's an RB1 situation.
Yeah, and where he doesn't line up as much with some of the other like big guys, James Cook, Jonathan Taylor, McCaffrey, is that he just doesn't get as much work in the passing game, but the run volume is there. I mean, he's sixth in the NFL in rushing attempts this year. He averages 4.95 yards a carry. He's averaging 81 yards a game. With the way the offense moves, you expect him to get a touchdown. So like he's a safe guy in that you're almost like with a touchdown thrown in there, you're looking at a pretty much guaranteed 13, 14 points a week. And then you're kind of playing off of touchdown luck a little bit, but he just doesn't get as much work in the pass game. He has a 5% target rate, which is somewhat low for a running back. And it is because Ferguson's there. It is because CeeDee Lamb's there. It is because Turpin's there that Dak's check down second reads don't funnel toward Williams as much as other teams do with running backs. And so that's where he misses out on that top tier RB1 value. But because of the volume and because of his ability and their ability of the run game, he's always going to be viable. I think this week might be a tough matchup. And it might push the Cowboys through the air a little bit more because the Chiefs have been defending the run well. But I think he's a RB1 for sure.
And then like further than that, right? I believe he's going to be a free agent coming up this season. Do you think the Cowboys should try to keep him or?
I mean, it's like, I think that if you could get him at a cheap value, I think he's worth hanging around. It's, I think it comes down to what he wants for money. If you can get him at a reasonable value, I think he's worth keeping around because he does fit in that run game and you can use him in a lot of different concepts well. But I think that you would want to also look at potentially upgrading or getting a guy into a committee, but that's not really how Dallas runs. So I could see them just saying, we like Javonte, sticking with it and having him be the lead back until it doesn't work.
Yeah. From my perspective as a fan, I'm not like very excited about Javonte in the backfield. It's like an upgraded Kareem Hunt from a rushing perspective. Like he's got more wiggle than Kareem Hunt has right now. But it's not something where I'm like, oh man, this guy's like a threat to break it from anywhere. He does really good in pass protection too. There's clips that
Yeah.
we can show you that are like, hey, this guy's stepping up and taking on linebackers and defensive tackles and ends and etc. And that all of that kind of stuff is underrated. The fact that you can play him in all situations is underrated as well. You don't need him in the pass game because you have like 3-4 options on the field that are pretty dang good. Yeah, I think if you can get him for less than $5 million a year, that's probably fine. If you're thinking about a dynasty situation, if you asked me today, like, do I think the Cowboys will try to retain him? I do. I think that he's bought a lot of goodwill with the coaching staff. You see it, like Brian Schottenheimer was quoted talking about how he likes big backs. Javonte is bigger than most backs in the NFL these days because now everybody's gotten smaller, petite, etc. He runs with power. Like those are things that they like out of their running back. So I do think that he'll probably be on this team longer term, and I don't think that they're gonna like split the workload too much. So from a dynasty perspective or anything like that, like I think it's actually a pretty solid win. He's not very old either. And now
No, he is still super young. And I also think that like honestly looking at the metrics, it makes sense to hang on to him. He's got the same explosive run rate as James Cook. He's 0.01 yards per carry under Bijan Robinson in yards per carry this season. He stacks up there with the better running backs in the NFL. And so I think he is a very good runner. I think he does have a lot of wiggle, and I think that he's worth it in that offense. It's just I also kind of lean toward, unless you have a big difference maker at running back, you should always be looking at other options alongside what you have. But I think he's good to have as a mainstay there. And I think he has value in that, like I said, he sees and runs all of the different concepts very well.
It's certainly easy for you to say as a Lions fan with Jahmyr Gibbs back there, having a real difference maker can really change an offense. Though I'm still not a guy who thinks that taking a running back with your first round pick makes sense, but it's still like you can clearly see in situations where you have a Bijan, a Jonathan Taylor, a Jahmyr Gibbs like type of athlete, and how it changes the whole concept of what defenses have to do in those situations. We're going to take a quick break. I want to come back after this and talk a little bit about Dak Prescott. We'll spend a couple minutes on it. We'll get into the weeds on the Cowboys defense as well. And specifically about this matchup. We'll talk about the offense versus the Kansas City Chiefs defense. And then we'll give some prop picks as well. All right, we're back. I had to take a quick break. Got family going crazy. It's Thanksgiving weekend. One thing I really wanted to talk about. So before we get into the matchup, I wanted to talk a little bit about Dak Prescott. I think it's a little bit of a hot button topic. Every year, the Cowboys are always in the limelight. So you kind of see situations with Dak Prescott either struggling or carrying a big offense, maybe not playing well in some big games, etc. I'm curious, especially from you, Steven, because you are a Lions fan. You've got Jared Goff as your quarterback. I'm really just curious, like what your perspective is on Dak Prescott, where you maybe rank him amongst the top quarterbacks in the NFL. What are some things that he does well? If you have some weaknesses, I'd love to hear that too.
I mean, I think he's a top 10 quarterback. I think that quarterback rankings are fluid at times, but I think like he's consistently top 10. I think he processes really well. I think he's a really good pocket passer. And yeah, like what he's shown is that when he's healthy, he carries a consistently explosive offense. I would take him over a lot of, I would take him into, I would swap Dak and Jared. I don't know if it'd be necessarily an upgrade, but I think it'd be about this. I think you'd have some strengths within the offense that would get elevated. I think that you'd have some stuff that would go down, but I think he's a bona fide top 10 quarterback when he's healthy. And I think when you're surrounding him with weapons like he has, he's reminding everyone that he is exactly that. Yeah. I think there were a lot of questions coming into the year of what this offense would be, what Dak would look like. I think we went through the cycle of the end of the year, and is Dak the answer? Do they need to move on? What is going on? And I think he's affirming that, no, he is legitimate. Save for the big game blowouts, and like mishaps and things happening like that, he's consistently putting out an explosive offense. I don't think you can argue with that. He processes really well. He
Yeah.
sees the field really well, and he's not afraid to rip it over the middle. He's not afraid to rip it up the seams.
The things that you see from a traditional quarterback, that you want to see, guys that are able to change protections, guys that are able to check into different plays, guys that know when a DB is coming in hot and they need to go to their hot read because they're seeing the blitz or what have you. I mean, Dak has all of that, right? And that's something that I think when we talk about the quarterbacks in the NFL, like these things get lost because we actually have a ton of really young quarterbacks. Dak's one of the elder statesmen right now. I think he's like 31 or something. Um, and so these other quarterbacks aren't necessarily at that place when it comes to processing speed and knowing exactly what the defense is doing. We just saw Dak play against Vic Fangio's defense. He's seen everything before. There's nothing that you can throw at him that he probably hasn't seen. So from that perspective, like I think that it's just one of those things that when you have Dak Prescott at quarterback, your offense is going to be at least above average. And then when you have the right weapons, it can be explosive like we're seeing. And that's just kind of where it leads to for this team. Now, the tricky thing is when you start thinking about the situation that we have for this Thanksgiving, coming up against the Kansas City Chiefs, Dak Prescott, the offense, George Pickens, CeeDee Lamb, there's matchups there that are going to be a little bit different than what we've seen from other defenses, right? We saw the team take advantage of the other cornerback and Adoree Jackson. I think every single clip that you showed was George Pickens or CD beating Adoree.
Pretty much.
But now coming into this week, what are we expecting? What are the matchups? Who is going to be lined up on CeeDee Lamb? Who's going to be lined up on George Pickens? Are there situations to exploit coverages, etc.?
Yeah, I expect Kansas City to lean into their too high. I think like what Spags is going to do is he's going to throw a lot of eye candy, a lot of questions for Dak to answer and blitzes and where guys are coming from, what guys are dropping. That's what Spags does really well, and it's where you can affect a quarterback like Dak is changing his eyes and messing with, giving him a look and then dropping into a different look. And Spags is really good at that. I kind of expect him to go a little bit more too high. Kansas City has gone too high against like teams like Philly, Denver, Indianapolis. They lead one high against teams like Detroit, Washington, Buffalo, Jacksonville. I think Dallas falls more into a too high perspective, in my opinion, from a Kansas City standpoint. I think they're going to try to force Dak to work inside. I imagine McDuffie sees more of CeeDee Lamb. I think that makes sense with how McDuffie can travel into the slot. And then I think it creates opportunity for George Pickens. I think this is, if anything, if I were to choose between the two of them, I think George Pickens is the guy that probably has the bigger game if the offense ends up functioning well, because I think you're going to get a lot of George Pickens ISO situation against Jalen Watson. And it's a matchup that I like Pickens over Watson a decent amount of times.
The funny thing is you would probably say that regardless of who the cornerback was, to be quite honest. But at the same time, having one of your better corners on CeeDee Lamb, and I think I posted this on Twitter too, but there's speculation from the Kansas City side that McDuffie will mostly be on Lamb, but Spagnuolo is a type of guy who still switches things up, wants to give different looks, different matchups. Because go for it.
McDuffie's not a shadow corner. That's not how he's going to be used. The closest he ever came this year is against Amon-Ra St. Brown, and again, that's kind of how CeeDee Lamb works a little bit. He works a decent amount outside and then pops into the slot a good amount too. And that's why I think it makes sense to have McDuffie, because he's comfortable bumping into the slot and lining up over a guy like Lamb in the slot. But he'll see George Pickens probably on 35% of his routes at least. But it'll be a lot of Dak trying to work the middle of the field against too high. And then when he can get George Pickens ISO'd, he'll probably work that when it's not McDuffie against him. But how Kansas City defends the seams and defends over the middle when they drop into too high, I think is what will shape the way the game does, because Kansas City can get beat over the middle and against like inline work against like for a guy like Ferguson, but they can do some confusing stuff with their linebackers and even bringing down a guy like Brian Cook into the box a little bit and playing more of a nickel instead of their traditional base defense and things like that. I think that it really is going to come down to how they defend the middle of the field.
Yeah, and I think we talked about it before too, that Pickens has some big splits when it comes to like too high versus single high, obviously with just having essentially man coverage whenever he goes against single high,
Right.
when he does his like vertical routes and stuff like that. It kind of sets up for an interesting matchup because of that. Because you would think with McDuffie on CeeDee Lamb that means that, hey, like Pickens is set up for a really, really nice game, but they're likely to play another guy over the top on him for most of the game. So based off of how we described it and like even the way that we've looked at some of the numbers, it kind of sets up for an interesting Ferguson situation over the middle of the field.
That's kind of my thought. And yeah, it'll challenge Dak because Kansas City doesn't run. They have run a little bit of man, but I don't think they'll go as much man against a team like Dallas. I think that plays into Dallas's favor. But really on like they're running man about 25% of the time. So it's going to come down to Dak being able to decipher zones and decipher what Spags is throwing at him. And I think Ferguson is the beneficiary of that. And I think Pickens ends up because the Chiefs do like to go a little bit more cover 4 over cover 2. I think that lends to a little bit more man matchups with Pickens too. So I think they'll focus McDuffie on like we've said, McDuffie on Lamb, and Pickens will have his opportunities on the outside, and like Ferguson will be what opens up the middle.
So I think we're both aligning on a bigger game than normal for Jake Ferguson, as opposed to it being something like CeeDee Lamb or Pickens. Those guys will get their numbers probably, but it's just what's going to be boosted and what the defense is basically going to give them. And it seems like what's going to end up happening is Ferguson's going to be the seam guy. He's going to be kind of working over the middle of the field, and potentially that ends up being the guy that's more available for Dak Prescott in this matchup.
Yeah, and it'll Dak's still probably going to throw for over 260. Like that, this offense is still going to put up a number. It's like we talk about who's going to be the bigger beneficiary. It's more of who's going to perform over what they're expected, because they're all going to kind of hit their expectations. CeeDee Lamb's probably going to hit 70 yards. George Pickens probably going to hit right around 70 yards. It's really trying to find the guy that's going to of the 3 or 4 guys in that offense, who's going to overperform, who's most likely to overperform their expectation, because you kind of just expect them to hit where they're at, which is top tier, from a fantasy perspective. In a PPR, George Pickens is looking at 16, 70 points a game. CeeDee Lamb's looking right around the same. Like that's going to have holding power every week.
Yeah, I completely agree. And then when we think about the run game, you talked a little bit about it with Javonte Williams earlier and kind of the run fits and how this is all going to work out. The Chiefs are pretty stifling in the run game from what we've seen this season, but there are still some angles that the Cowboys can attack. You talked about outside zone earlier. I actually tweeted this out earlier this week as well. It's not just outside zone. It's really the alleys where the Chiefs struggle the most. So outside zone being one of the plays that attacks the alleys, but the C and D gaps. So basically like off the tackle or even wider than that.
Right.
For people that are just like trying to understand what that looks like.
Yeah, and they do have a pretty decent discrepancy in how they defend like zone, or like what they give up against zone and man. They're very good against a lot of like pulling lineman concepts. They give up under 4 yards a carry against counter. They give out under 4 yards a carry against pull lead. They do give up like 6 yards of carry against power, but they've only faced like 9 reps of power this year. So how much stake can you put into that? But and then against like man duo style run, they're giving up under 4 yards of carry, but inside zone they give up 4.2, which is like doesn't sound like a lot, but for an inside zone, that's a little bit higher up there. And then outside zone they give up 4.7 yards of carry, which is kind of like right around middle of the league, upper middle in the sense that they're not as good. So like Dallas has shown they can push their run game to go against teams' weaknesses. So I imagine we'll see a little bit more outside zone. And I think that also kind of potentially brings in some Malik Davis reps, because Malik Davis has a little bit of explosiveness to work outside zone pretty well. We saw that last week against the Eagles when he hit for that like 20+ yard run.
Yeah. The only thing that I'll say is there's actually a big split in how the Cowboys are able to, how defense has been able to attack the Chiefs when they go the direction of Chris Jones and when they avoid the direction of Chris Jones.
Yeah.
And those outside runs towards the side away from Chris Jones have generated I think it was 6.6 yards per carry or something like that. Something ridiculous.
Yeah.
There's actually a decent sample size too. I think it was 50 rushes this year. So there is an angle to attack. Do we think that the Cowboys are going to do that? I mean, we're not in the coaching staff. I think just us as football minds, we would typically want to do something like that, right? Let's avoid going towards the side of the big defensive tackle that really blows everything up for the offense. But you can't always set yourself up to do that, because then teams overload one side and you're just not able to create as much space for yourself when you do that. So you kind of have to play the game of let's go this way when they think that we're going that way, and then we're going to go this way when they think we're going to go the other way.
And that's where they are good. They are good with counter, and that's where the Chiefs have defended counter well, but it'll be a good matchup of if the Cowboys can work their counter concepts well against the Chiefs this week, that, that'll kind of shape up the run game a decent amount. And I mean, it also comes down to what their defense can do against Kansas City, because if they get behind the script and Kansas City starts blowing up their defense, it inevitably could push them away from the pass game or from the run game a little bit.
Yeah.
And so I think that kind of leads into, what do you see for the Cowboys defense? I think that we've seen kind of an evolution these last couple weeks. Obviously they have a new addition. They've had the new additions of Kenny Clark, of Quinnen Williams, DeMarvion Overshawn has come back. They acquired Logan Wilson. That's 4 out of 7 out of your front 7 have now changed since week 7. And
Malik Tucker is back, and Siobhan Ravel, the Cowboys, I believe, 2nd round pick, maybe 3rd. I can't remember off the top of my head.
So all of that being said, this was a defense that was hemorrhaging against the pass game early in the year. How do you see that progressing this week in what is obviously a difficult matchup against Patrick Mahomes?
Yeah, I know. And I know you have some film clips that we're going to show too. There's a schematic thing that I think this Eberflus defense does, and it's been the same way that we've seen in the past for the Bears in last year and previous years as well. And then going back to even the Colts when he was with them as well. The big thing that I see is this sets up to be a really, really strong matchup for Mahomes, Rashee Rice, the underneath game in general. I think when people think about the Cowboys defense earlier in the year, it was hey, deep ball city, we're just able to basically have guys running wide open down the field. A lot of that's basically been taken away. I think people have gotten a little bit more comfortable in the scheme. They have different personnel out there, people that are not just blowing their assignments completely, which is great. But at the same time, there's opportunity underneath based off of the scheme to basically eat. And the reason why that is because the Cowboys play off man.
Actually,
their cornerbacks. Yeah, you've got a clip.
Yeah, I can pull the clip. It'll set up just kind of what you see of. This is where you do see their corners quite a bit. It is usually 7 to 9 yards off the receivers. They're not up in press coverage hardly at all, if ever.
Yeah. And so you see, I think this is the clip with Kalen Carson on the outside with AJ Brown. Kalen Carson's like 7-8 yards off the ball, right? So what this does, and then when you actually play the clip, you can see that he already starts to backpedal as well. So he's starting 7 yards off, and then he goes to 10.
Yeah, he's in kind of it's cover 3. He's the deep third safety. He's bailing deep. It's you can kind of see it. The nickel corner creeps up. He's responsible for the flat. He's responsible deep. That actually is probably cover 6 now that I think about it.
Regardless,
yeah,
you see that he's bailing out and lined up 7 yards. Once AJ Brown starts running his route, he's at 10. And so there's just a lot of room underneath that the Cowboys are willing to give up from a defensive perspective. And it's a choice, right? And against teams like the Eagles, that choice is probably fine because, Jalen Hurts isn't an elite quarterback, but a guy like Mahomes, actually, I think
people with that.
Yeah, I tweeted this out, but Mahomes has the second or third highest attempts within 5 yards of the line, or within 10 yards of the line of scrimmage in the entire NFL this season on a per game basis. It's like 23 attempts per game, right?
Yeah.
And we know like the big stats for Mahomes, like we've seen the MVP numbers in previous years, and people are talking about how he's not like as elite anymore. He's had better numbers this year, but one thing he does really well is get positive EPA on nearly every single drop back. And the way he does that is by getting the ball out quick. He finds his guys underneath. He checks down a lot. He gets positive plays on pretty much every single play, right? And a lot of that ends up being Rashee Rice within 5 yards of the line of scrimmage, or, just a tight end in the flat, or a running back out of the backfield, just kind of like leaking out or what have you. All of those situations are going to set up for some pretty positive yardage plays for the Chiefs, and it seems like the Cowboys defense is willing to do that.
Yeah, and I think one of the big talking points with the Dallas defense has been their heavy leaning into zone this year. I think a lot of people have been upset with how Eberflus has run the defense at times, rightfully so, and he's leaned a lot into zone. He's incorporated man a little bit more later in the year after the first couple weeks of going 80-90 of running almost no man reps, but it's going to be a big challenge because Mahomes, he kills zone. That's where he thrives. He has 8.86 yards per attempt against zone this year, and he's completing 71.9% of his passes. So that's a huge challenge for the Cowboys, and that I think one of the ways to slow down the Chiefs this year is if you can get into a press man and you can get into their receivers' faces a lot. They're smaller. They don't get through contact as well. Xavier Worthy had a brutal week last week because the Indianapolis Colts were able to go up man-to-man, play press man hard, and get in their faces. The Cowboys aren't necessarily going to be able to do that. So it creates a challenge of how they're going to attack Mahomes to force him off his force him off of his first reads and force him off of those quick passes. Because that's where, that's exactly how Mahomes runs his offense is what kills the Cowboys defense.
Yeah, it's a very terrible schematic matchup. I think on a short week too, we've seen the Cowboys do man like one or two times, like heavy man one or two times this year. I think on a short week, new personnel, they've had success in the past couple of games running their zone scheme. I don't think you're going to see much of a change. Like I think they're going to do. They mix in cover 3, they mix in cover 4 and cover 2. Like it's just a wide variety of zone concepts that they're willing to run on from a coverage perspective.
Yeah.
But any way you slice it, you're going to see situations where guys are open underneath, and that's just kind of what they're willing to give up. The other thing that I've seen from the Cowboys defense that hasn't necessarily gotten cleaned up from a defense perspective is still the linebacker play that I see is still guys that are not getting enough depth in their dropbacks when they're receiving. And what that does is that sets up a lot of situations where guys are just kind of open in the intermediate part of the field. We talked about it with Jake Ferguson. Like, he ran a seam route and Nakobe Dean didn't get enough depth, so it allowed Dak Prescott to kind of like just go over the top. And you're going to see that with the Cowboys defense a million times.
Yeah, that's what Mahomes does really well. He does really well at sucking in linebackers. One thing we did want to touch on is just a little bit of a change in how Dallas has run their defense since they've got Quinnen Williams, is that you are getting this 5-man front a little bit more often in both against run and, or especially against heavy personnel. When teams are like, when the Eagles went 12 personnel, they were using this 5-man front into like a 5-2, loading the box a little bit. And it created a decent amount of chaos when they were going up against the pass, where you're getting one-on-ones for Quinnen Williams and he's able to drive a guy back. Jalen Hurts completes the pass, but that's a new wrinkle. Everybody had worried about the pass rush with losing Micah Parsons, and this 5-man front and having Quinnen Williams and forcing double teams onto either Quinnen Williams or Kenny Clark. They were able to get pressure, and that was what kind of ultimately helped them win that game, was that the pressure just kept building and building and building. And towards the end of the game, Hurts was not able to get into his quick game as easily because of the interior pressure.
Yeah, and I was talking about this on Twitter too. Like, there's a difference between exterior pressure and interior pressure. Teams haven't been able to do it that well against the Chiefs, getting interior pressure. But I believe their left guard, is it Trey Smith?
Yeah, they lost to, they're out Trey Smith this week, which is a big loss. He's one of the best guards in the NFL, and he's integral to that. Like, Kansas City's always had a good interior offensive line, and it's why Mahomes has done so well against pressure, because he has lanes inside and can scoot outside of pressure. But without Trey Smith, it does make him a little bit more vulnerable to up the middle pressure. And it also kind of adds, like, again, we talked about this 5-man front that they get into. It can blow up rush concepts as well, where they're able to get a hat on a hat, force one-on-one situations. And because Quinnen Williams and Kenny Clark are so good, they're able to get wins. They're able to muck up the middle. The linebackers able to work off it. Logan Wilson's been good in the run game over Sean, not in this, but like in other plays when they get into a traditional 5-2, where this is like a 5-2, but they have Donovan Wilson as like a nickel linebacker.
And they do really like dropping Donovan Wilson into the box.
Yes.
One of the things. He's a better run defender than he is a pass guy.
Yeah. So those are two things that have kind of changed that make obviously when you add two solid interior, like really good interior defensive linemen, it is going to help. And that's where I think the Chiefs have struggled in the run game. The Cowboys did really well against the Eagles this last week. I expect them to continue improving. So it kind of will fall. It probably will end up falling on a lot of like Patrick Mahomes RPOs that end up being quick passes that work, that effectively work the run game, but they're quick passes. I think because of like the soft coverage that Dallas plays, it makes that more of a viability than the up the middle stuff with Kareem Hunt trying to run into Kenny Clark and Quinnen Williams without your starting left guard.
Yeah. So from a fantasy perspective, I feel like the summary there is like Rashee Rice is going to be having a field day in like the short to intermediate part of the defense. Mahomes is going to be having a field day, checking down all day. If he gets interior pressure, he may struggle, but we haven't seen it much this year, so it's hard to imagine that it may happen. He's also really good at escaping the pocket and just keeping things going.
The Dallas communication is going to be challenged with Mahomes scrambling around. That is an inevitability when you face Mahomes. And the tight ends, Rashee Rice, middle of the field, will be available to him. Seeing what Xavier Worthy put on tape last week worried me a little bit, but I would like to see him be able to get integrated into the passing game more. But the problem is he's not separating right now.
And then lastly, from a run game perspective, like I don't think you can start either of these guys in fantasy this week. I mean, you could get a touchdown from Kareem Hunt. He's been like one of the highest success rate guys when it comes to like goal line type of stuff. But I don't think that any of these interior runs are really going anywhere this week. And the way that they need to attack is going to be through the pass game. And I kind of trust Andy Reid to make that happen. And with Mahomes. So summary, Rashee Rice is going to crush. Kelsey has a good matchup. Worthy is kind of up and down. I think we're just kind of like unsure because of the talent, not necessarily the situation.
And I could
run game is just avoid.
I could see usage with Brashard Smith in the passing game. Cowboys are giving up 7.5 yards per attempt to running backs this year. I think they've given up the most passing attempt or top 4 passing attempts to running backs this year. So that's something that they could exploit with using Brashard Smith a little bit in the pass game. We started to see that a little bit more last week against Indianapolis. So I think this is a week where that gets integrated a little bit more in, where you're seeing some swing screens to him, slip screens, things like that.
Yeah. We're going to take a quick break. We'll come back and we'll address some nice prop bets that we have for you guys, and then we'll just cut out of here. All right, we're back. We've got some exciting last couple of things to cover. We want to do prop bets. We just talked about this matchup. We talked about what we see in terms of holes within the game. What are some things that can that might happen, might not happen, right? From a schematic perspective. I think something that you pointed out earlier with the 5-man fronts, the way the Cowboys run defense is shaped up with the additions of Logan Wilson, Quinnen Williams, getting DeMar Viano overshown back, etc. There's not much room to run. And we saw that from Saquon Barkley. We saw that in the previous game with Ashton Jeanty. They didn't try to run very much. And now we're talking about a Chiefs team that has high success rate running backs with Kareem Hunt. But now Trey Smith is out. The 5-man front, the big guys. I think it's going to be a really tough sledding matchup from a schematic perspective for Kareem Hunt. And so my prop bet for this week is going to be Kareem Hunt under his 33.5 rushing yards. I know projections have him for like 40 plus yards. I think it's going to be tough sledding. I think the way that the Chiefs are going to be attacking this is going to be more so from a passing game perspective and opening up the run game through the pass instead. What are your thoughts, Steve?
Yeah, I agree with that. I think it is a Mahomes dropping back a lot and working RPOs that turn into passes more often than they turn into runs, just because of how soft of a zone covers that Dallas plays.
Yeah. And then, Steve, you had one too. You kind of teased it a little bit earlier today. What's going on with Jake Ferguson?
Yeah, I think we kind of talked about it with the 2-eye stuff. 2-eye, it just kind of inevitably leads to things underneath, and then where Jake Ferguson up the seams a little bit over the middle, that's where he kind of shines. I think that Kansas City is going to put a focus on trying to stop CeeDee Lamb and George Pickens as best as they can, and it will lead to underneath stuff, which is where Ferguson operates a lot, and I think it'll lead to a couple seam shots just throughout the game. And his receiving line, I think, is at like 33.5, was it? 33.5, 34.5, 35.5. So I think I like him over that. I like him over his 4.5 receptions. I think that he's going to be kind of the safety guy for Dak Prescott this week.
Yeah, I like it too. And even if you didn't want to do those, there's like his longest reception. If he actually does hit on one of those seams, it's going to be over 14.5. It'll be 15 plus yards for sure.
Right.
So there's opportunities across the board with that. Just to wrap up, wanted to make sure all of you guys know, one, we love doing this with you guys. Thanksgiving time, make sure you take care of your families, eat some good food. And lastly, just wanted to say, if you get a chance, follow Steve on Twitter at callmesteve07. You can find me at Dhanani Zain, and then like and subscribe to the show. Give us feedback. We're looking for it all. I mean, we're just doing this for the first time. We're not tech guys that have set up a bunch of different things before. We're just guys that know football and like analytics and want to talk about stuff with you guys. So feedback is always welcome. But if you don't have anything else, Steve, sayonara, everybody.
Yeah, happy Thanksgiving to everyone, and please feedback, all the feedback we can get. We want to make the show that we want to make, but we also want to make a show that appeals to as many people as possible. So feedback's the only way we're going to be able to do that.
All right, signing off.